By way of quick introduction, my name's Paul Westlake, or Westy. I'm digital director here at People Unboxed, and basically I deal with anything digital, hence me doing this session. And this session's designed to introduce you to AI, artificial intelligence, and it allows me, hopefully, to dispel a few myths, to open up the debate around AI and where we might use it in work, but also hopefully to show you how I personally use AI to help overcome some creative blocks I might have to be more productive, ultimately to help me get my work done. And the key word there is help. It helps me get my work done. It doesn't do it for me, but more of that later on. We'll see. And I'd love to get your take on some of that stuff. Now, first thing I would like to talk about is, I guess in some ways, what we call the elephant in the room. Let's deal with that. I understand that many of you may have joined this session for lots of different reasons. So to help me gauge the temperature in the room, I'd like to start with a very simple question. And that question, and you can answer this in the chat, and please do get involved in the chat and let me know your thoughts. Using no more than 2 words, describe to me how you feel about AI at work. Pop that in the chat for me. How do you feel about AI? What you? I'm not going to lead you. Just pop it in the chat and see what you think. Okay, so we've got a range of different. I was expecting that to come. We've got helpful, advantageous, helpful, exciting, optimizing, helpful, practical, useful, helpful, reduces or saves time. Yeah, absolutely right. I agree with that one. There's also some people saying they have some concerns. Okay. And can you make sure, though, that you're sending all of your messages, please, to everyone in the meeting so we can all see each other's chats? That would be really helpful. So here saying safety issues concerning critical company data. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something we need to be aware of. Where does that work? Again, an advantage to us, maybe. Maybe it's given us an unfair advantage over other people. We shall see. Cheating, someone says. Interesting. Yeah, okay. We'll come to that one in just a second. Helpful and concerning. I like that, Zishan. Yeah, basically we're balancing the two there, aren't we? Sensitive information about financials and customer databases. How does that work? We'll touch on the security concerns. We're definitely going to call that out. And we're also going to look at where do we stand when it comes to copyright, which is something that maybe doesn't come up so often. But, if you think about it, are we okay to use these images that we're creating? Are we okay to use some of the text that we're getting AI to create for us? So we've got a range of different ideas, a range of different thoughts coming in. Just let a few more people in. Here we go. So for those of you who have just joined, lovely to see you. Welcome along. My first question for you all, as you can see with my little elephant in the room there, is in no more than 2 words, describe how you feel about AI and using AI to do work or to get work done. If you could pop that in the chat for me, we'll take a few more from the people that have just joined, and then we'll dive into the course and I'll show you exactly how I'm using this to get my work done. So loads of people coming in. Someone's saying taking our job. Oh, okay, maybe. That's, as no ideas about it at this point. Makes life easy if you know how to use it properly. Charlene, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I quite like the if we know what we're doing with it. I think it's a mixture for most people. It's a mixture between excited and scared. I think it's probably fair to say. People are concerned that maybe it is going to take their job. Maybe people are concerned that it's going to sort of take over. And of course, we're going to cover all of those concerns. But for now, let's get into the course and let me take you through some of my thoughts around AI, maybe get rid of some of those myths, dispel some of those myths, and also show you how hopefully you can start using this stuff to help you at work. Now, Oh, by the way, of course, AI drew that elephant in the classroom for me. Of course it did. More about that later, though, and I'll show you how to do that. There's you thinking that I'm a really good artist. No, AI drew that one for me. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later on. For those of you who are concerned about AI taking over, it's worth calling out that you're probably already using AI and the power of AI probably on a daily basis. And in a lot of cases, you probably don't even realize you're doing that. So let me let everyone else in. There we go. Let me show you what I mean. Now, we're not going to go through everything that's using AI because there's a lot to it. But here on the screen are sort of just 6 examples, everyday examples that you might not even realize are powered by AI. So the first one, top left, this is a smart thermostat. So what do these do? Well, they learn your heating and cooling preferences. They adjust the temperature automatically for optimal comfort and efficiency. They know when you're coming home. They know what time you get up, and they try and set the temperature in the room literally to match you. Now, sure, they take some time to learn your habits, but once they do, we tend to set them, we tend to forget about them. Maybe we'll change them in the winter, but again, they're aware of when temperatures are dropping. They know when they need to be used. So that's a smart thermostat that is utilizing AI to keep you comfortable, I guess. The next one is a security system with facial recognition. So a doorbell is probably the best example. We have Ring doorbells, and yeah, sure, they've got a video camera on them, but it's actually AI in the background that's differentiating between familiar faces, and will only send you alerts when it detects unknown people, for example. Or you might want it the other way around. Maybe you only want the doorbell to ring when someone you know is ringing the doorbell and you don't want to be hassled by anybody else. But they can also recognize if a parcel's been left at your doorstep, and they can differentiate between a cat and a person and a car. And they're using AI to do this all the time. This allows you to only get the notifications that you want. Again, they do need to learn, though. They get it wrong. Ironically, we have one of these on our house. My wife just got a new car. All I can assume is that the front of her car looks like a face, because whenever she parks now, it says there's a person at the front door. It's clearly not. It's her car. So I need to go in there. I basically teach AI and say, this is not a person. And it's fair to say it's taken a few days, but over a few days, it's now better at recognizing it. This is a car, not a person. Again, it needs to learn. Bear that one in mind. We'll be talking about that later on. Bottom left, smart speakers, virtual assistants. I think a lot of us have these in the home now, and they use AI to understand our voice commands. They play music for us. They adjust the lights. They set reminders. You know, I think this is when people say that they're concerned about AI. This is one of the ones that comes up quite regularly, because surely for these things to work, that means that Alexa, or I'm going to be very careful when I say either Alexa or Siri today, because I'm aware that everything's going to beep around me. But what it does mean is that when we speak to one of those assistants, that must mean it's constantly listening. Well, the short answer to that is no. They're not constantly listening to everything you say. Let me give you a quick breakdown of how they work. So most of the smart assistants use what we call a wake word. So hence us having to say Alexa or Siri to activate something. Their microphones are always on. Okay, it's fair to say that. And they're listening, but all they're doing is listening for that specific word. And they only when we say that word, or they call it a wake word, will the device start recording, and then it sends our data to the respective company servers for processing. Or in Apple's case, actually does it on the device itself. The servers analyze your requests and they provide a response. That's the way it works. So while the microphones are technically always on, they're not recording everything that you say. Now, some of you may feel that hard to understand or think, I'm sure that's not the case. More about that again later. And you know what? These things have almost transformed the way that a lot of us live. So bringing Alexa into our kitchen, for example, transforms how we cook. It's how we add things to our shopping list. Now, to give you an insight into me, I live with obviously my wife and 2 daughters, and despite living with 3 people that, with their own admission, probably aren't that technical, they're quite comfortable adding things to the shopping list. They're quite comfortable setting timers because it just works. It uses natural language to do that. So smart assistants, again, change the way that we're working. Still letting people in, excuse me. Next one along, bottom right. This one might be one that surprises you. Your washing machine. or your tumble dryer. And what these things do is they adjust settings based on the amount or the load, the amount of clothes that you put in there, the size of the load, and also the fabrics. Or maybe you've got a smart fridge. Now, a smart fridge suggests recipes based on what it knows is inside. Okay, so some of these things are changing. Again, it's early days for this stuff, but smart washing machines that literally weigh it, and they're using AI to learn. And again, they can maybe decide electricity is cheaper in the evening, so I'm only going to turn on at this time. And then I think the last two are ones that we use all the time and probably don't even recognize that they're AI. So what about our TV streaming services? It's not guessing what you want to watch. It's using AI algorithms to personalize your recommendations. So it's showing you movies, showing you shows. It's the way Spotify works. It's the way Apple Music works, where it's basically suggesting music that you might like, not just by naming the bands, but it knows about the genre of music, the type of music, the amount of times you skip past a song. All of that stuff is making it better and better and getting closer to your personalized listening preferences. And if you want to see this in action, well, the best way to do it is to only have one account set up, and then you'll see how quickly that can mess things up. For example, clearly one of my daughters was watching Netflix last week because when I went on to watch something yesterday, it started suggesting all manner of programs that are of no interest to me whatsoever. And it was clearly basing that on what they'd been watching because they'd forgotten to switch to their own account. It's actually quite hard to retrain it as well, but that's more about that further down the line. And the other one, which I'm imagining we all use all day, every day, is a spam filter in our email. And if you think about it, how does that work? Well, email filters use AI to identify and block not just senders, but the content of a email, for example. You don't even see those things drop into your inbox. They're basically done. They're there. It's sorted for you. So it's really important to recognize before we move on that in many cases, we complain when our smart assistant gets things wrong. We laugh about it being called a smart assistant. Well, it didn't understand what I said, or it got this wrong. And yet we don't do anything to help that. So did you know, for example, that you can tell Siri when it pronounces a name incorrectly? Or you can tell your email program that something should or shouldn't be in junk, rather than just moving it. Try and retrain it. And that's a really important message to understand when it comes to AI. In many cases, AI needs to learn, and it needs to learn through human input. So it uses human input to learn and improve. Hold that thought for those of you that are scared and worried about AI. Ultimately, more of it later, but it needs us to do a good job. So rather than seeing AI as something we should fear, and some of you are really excited about it, I get that, let's consider it another way. Let's start with maybe a bit of a story. So my eldest daughter started university last September. Now, like most courses, her course requires extensive research, extensive reading, summarizing of documents, putting all of this stuff together so that she can then write a number of essays for her course. Now, you know where this is going. My second question for you is coming on the back end. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to ask you my second question. So I've painted the picture. She started university. They've got a big university library. She's got the internet. I'd love to say a bit of a yes or no, a bit of a straw poll. Are you comfortable using AI for study, or do you see AI for studying as cheating? So if you think AI for studying is cheating, put yes in the chat. If you don't think, or you think it's acceptable to use AI to do your studying for you, put no in the chat. Let's see where we go. Okay, the first four people that have come through have all been yeses, and then we've got a load of no's. So very much against, no, yes, no, 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 yes, yeah. Okay, you could see where this is going in the chat. I mean, there's what, 54 of you in there. People are expanding, but not cheating if the student learns advanced techniques. It means they're more equipped than someone doing it by hand. Okay, thanks for expanding on that, Ellie. So Emma's saying, yes, it is cheating, I think. I think we've got a couple of Emmas on there. So has they got a yes and no? Ultimately, it's up to you. Okay, what you think, and it's your mindset. However, for those of you who think it absolutely shouldn't be allowed, let's consider it in a slightly different way. Firstly, I will be generally in agreement that getting AI to do my homework for me isn't a good thing. Okay, I'm absolutely with that. However, let's think about my daughter at university and what she's doing. Consider how, before AI or without AI, consider how she would research a topic. She would go to the library and research lots of books. She'd possibly use the internet for research. She'd speak to other people on the topic. She'd pull on her previous experience, perhaps from notes that she's made before, and perhaps it was notes when she was doing her A-levels, whatever it may be. She'd read research papers. She'd read white papers. Okay. And all of those things would allow her to basically put together this research paper, which she could then make into, say, a course outline and then write her essay. Now, in a nutshell, when we ask an AI chatbot a question, that's pretty much exactly what happens too. The difference is AI isn't limited to the books that are available in the library at that point in time in that specific library. Imagine it having access to all of the books that have ever been written. It can reference thousands and thousands of websites every second. It can check TED Talks. It checks YouTube videos. And not only can it look at all of these different bits of research, if you like, or look at all of this content, what it can then do is summarize all of that for us with links to the source content, and it can do it really fast. So it isn't writing the essay or the report. What it is doing is helping us get a foothold to do that ourselves. And that's the key. For me, rather than seeing AI as a bit of a cheat code, consider it as a really good assistant. And I'll give you an analogy, a real world analogy. Think about a pocket calculator for a second. Now, we all use these, or they're probably on our phones now, aren't they? But we all use calculators to do maths. Most of us did maths at school, and yet a calculator is still quicker and easier way of doing it. And even accountants, they use these all the time. And it's probably fair to say accountants are pretty good at maths. So at a push, we could probably do our own accounts if we had to. If you're a small business owner like we are, we could do our own accounts, and yet we employ accountants. And we also accept that those accountants are going to use a calculator and they're going to use a spreadsheet. Now, imagine a seasoned accountant drowning in a sea of receipts, invoices, tax forms. Their mind whirls with numbers, calculations, deadlines, and then suddenly a piece of software arrives, which is a magic calculator. And this calculator doesn't just crunch numbers, it remembers past entries, it flags inconsistencies, it suggests tax deductions, it might suggest things that the accountant has missed. Is the accountant suddenly replaced by the calculator? Absolutely not. They are still the expert. They still understand the bigger picture. They're still making strategic decisions. They're still interpreting the calculator's outputs. When they do something on a calculator, they know that that number doesn't look right, and they'll go back and check. And that's the difference. The calculator is a tool. It's a powerful tool, amplifying their abilities, but it does save them time and effort. For me, I try to see AI in much the same way. It's much like that magic calculator, but for tasks. It analyzes vast amounts of data, it identifies patterns, it suggests solutions, but it also lacks the personal touch, the human touch, and it's not, at the moment, it's not very good at understanding context, nuance, ethics, that sort of thing. So for today, if we make a mindset shift, we can see things differently. AI is here to empower us, not to replace us. So it's a tool that wielded wisely, just like the calculator in the hands of an accountant, it can be really, really powerful. So let's maybe embrace AI for today. If you've got concerns about it, that's absolutely fine. But let's look at its potential and how we can maybe use it for a better future together. It's important to see how AI can be a useful tool as well, though, rather than a bit of a party trick. So a lot of what we see on AI at the moment is all around, oh, it can do this, it can create this image. It's a bit of a party trick, but then image creation can be fun. But ultimately, is it useful? Let me show you what I mean. Let me move my screens about a bit. I'm just going to swap to different screen, if you bear with me. There we go. Okay, so we talked about our elephant in the room earlier. This is possibly when we talk about AI, what you're seeing on the screen is what people think. This is Adobe Firefly. I just happen to be an Adobe subscriber. And basically what we've got here is it allows us to put in a text prompt, okay, and then using that text prompt is going to create an image for us. So if you give me a second, if I do. So what is it we want? Ditch that text. So I want aggressive guinea pig blue crash helmet. Okay, and let's say our aggressive guinea pig wearing a blue crash helmet is riding, sorry, you're riding a quad bike, flashing through. Now, if ever you're teaching a course and it's about AI and you're doing this stuff in real time, bear in mind this creates this image every time. So every time I do it, it's going to be different. It was great when I practiced yesterday. Today it might not be as good, but let's have a look. An aggressive guinea pig wearing a blue crash helmet, riding a quad bike, splashing through muddy puddles. There you go. So quite a very specific prompt there, and let's see what, and we'll click on generate. So what's happening here is the AI is looking at thousands and thousands of reference images. Okay, and that's the key. It's looking at things that potentially already exist. And wow, I don't know if you want to react to that in the chat, but I don't know about you. I think it's done quite a nice job there. They're pretty cool. I do like a decent guinea pig. So and you know what, I'm going to change it slightly because these all look like photos. But if I go over here to the, let me show you. See, I've got the content type at the moment is photo. If I click on art, and then what we can do is generate that again. Turn off that. Okay, it's going to have a better go at it. Here we go. I'm really liking this one here. How cool is that? So there he is. So there's our aggressive looking guinea pig riding a quad bike, splashing through muddy puddles wearing a blue crash helmet. Okay, someone's saying he's not aggressive enough. Oh, come on, it's difficult for a guinea pig to be aggressive. But what we can do is we could make him more aggressive, I guess, by changing the prompt again. But you get the idea. So when people talk about AI, I think in a lot of cases, this is what they're talking about. They think it's about making images. However, all of that stuff is sort of, this is what I mean by a bit of a one-trick pony. It's good at that, but so what? What are we going to actually use that for? So let me move my screens back around. There we go. So it's not, let's try and look at it as not a toy. What we've just seen there with our guinea pig is what we call generative AI. It takes a prompt from us and it guesses what we want. It references thousands of existing images and it mashes them together to produce a new one. Before we get into how we're actually going to use this to help us maybe write scripts or to help us in the line of work, I just want to quickly look at some of the jargon that surrounds AI, because there's a lot of talk around AI and there's a lot of words being buzzed around and people don't really know what they mean. So let's explain a few of the buzzwords around it. So on the screen there, I've put together some common buzzwords, and let's explain each one, and then I'll dig into how I use AI in my work. So the first one is what we call ML, machine learning. So imagine a computer program that gets better at a task the more data it sees. Like a friend learning a game by playing it over and over and over again. Machine learning algorithms improve by analyzing information. So in short, the way machine learning works is lots and lots of trial and error. It keeps trying something until it finds a better way. If I do this, oh, this worked well. If I do, oh, that wasn't so good. And that's pretty much the way machine learning works. Deep learning. Now, this is sort of a subset of machine learning, if you like, but it's closer now to the way the human brain works. So rather than just lots of trial and error, it uses complex structures, and they're called artificial neural networks. And it does that to recognize patterns. And by building up patterns, it can then make decisions. which is pretty much the way our brain works. We see something, we quickly reference back to whether we've seen this before, we've seen something similar to it. We've probably not seen something exactly the same, but we're pretty good at looking at something thinking, oh, that's kind of like this. Those are the sort of patterns I'm talking about. That's what deep learning is about. It's basically working more like the way our brain works. Now, the next one, NLP, natural language processing, this allows computers to understand and respond to human language. So, when you go onto a call center now, sometimes it says, do you want to speak to a real person? And you say yes, or we go onto a chat. The chances are that when you're talking to someone on a website, you are actually talking to an AI bot, okay? And it's quite easy to realize that you're not actually speaking to a right person. It's not uncommon for companies to give that person a name too, to try and make it feel like you're talking to a real person. And I was reading an example of a company that did exactly that. And they were using it for the hiring process. And they called her Olivia. And then all of a sudden it was, well, I spoke to Olivia and she said I could do this. And then the company then has to backtrack and say, yeah, actually, that person doesn't exist. That's just a chatbot and we have no access to that. So my personal opinion on this one is if you're talking to a chatbot, the company should call out you're talking to a chatbot. Trying to make it look and sound like a real person is almost leading people up the garden path a little bit. I guess it's like teaching a machine to speak our language, though. So virtual assistants use this all the time to have conversations with us. Well, up to a point. Okay, again, they can get it wrong. Generative AI is exactly what we just looked at when we looked at the picture of the guinea pig. Okay, so think of it as a creative machine that uses its knowledge to produce something original. There's danger in that because it can work with things like images, text, or music, but it might be seen. You might have seen this used to create realistic fake videos or deep fakes, as they're known. So this is one of the areas of AI that people are getting really concerned about because we can make things look really real. At the moment, originally it was imagery, and now it's video as well. So it's concerning people a bit, but more about that later. And then what we have is what we call LLMs, or large language models. So what we're going to look at today when I demo what I use is something called Gemini, which is Google's large language model. ChatGPT is probably the other one that you've probably heard of. Ultimately, they work in the same way. So an LLM it's a type of AI trained on a huge amount of data, a massive amount of data. So this allows it to communicate and generate human-like text, such as writing different types of creative content, whether that be poems or scripts or emails or whatever it may be. But it's also really good at answering your questions quite comprehensively. Now, the next question, or the obvious question's got to be, well, you've said it, I've said it learns from reading a massive amount of data. Well, where does that data come from? Well, the internet for a start, which is the main one. And if you think about the internet and how the internet works, it's written and curated by us. Okay, human input writes those websites. Human input puts the ideas onto those websites. It writes those blogs. But what an LLM can do is then look at all of that information, millions of websites, millions of blogs, Wikipedia entries, and then pull all of that together almost instantaneously. And this is a really important point to grasp, actually. AI is currently learning from what we teach it. Okay. Wikipedia is a great example. The amount of times I see people bring up Wikipedia and say, well, it says it on here. I can go in, you can go in and change a Wikipedia entry. Okay, that doesn't mean it's fake. It just means it could be. And I think that's the key when it comes to AI. You can't take anything as completely gospel truth. All right. We need to look at it in a slightly different way. So AI algorithms are great at finding patterns for data. But something that seems obvious to you and AI can get really wrong. So a fun example, if you like, is we can show an AI model thousands and thousands of pictures of cats and dogs. And it will become, over time, very, very good identifying what is a cat and what is a dog. And then we show it a Manx cat. And if you don't know what a Manx cat is, a Manx cat is a species of cat without a tail. And AI will look at that and say, well, that's not a cat or a dog because it hasn't got a tail. Because the way it's been taught is to look for tails. Okay, and then differentiate between a cat and a dog, for example. It's a crude example, but you get the logic behind it. Or another example, imagine a hospital using AI to predict which patients are at risk of getting readmitted. So how's it going to do that? Well, the AI is going to analyze mountains of data, look for patterns in patient records. It might find that patients who have a certain diagnosis and live alone are more likely to be readmitted. Now, there's a problem there. And the problem is that living alone may have nothing to do with their readmission. It might be because they live alone, there's a lack of social support when they leave hospital, for example. However, AI puts those two things together and assumes living alone causes the higher risk when really it's a lack of social support that's the bigger factor. And that could have massive negative consequences. So the hospital might be more cautious about discharging patients who live alone because you know what? The logic or the logically, those people are going to be readmitted. Okay, so sometimes we need to look at the nuance. This is what I mean about looking at the nuance, looking at the context, reading more into it. So AI is a powerful tool, but it's essential to use it responsibly and be aware of its limitations. Okay, so the key is it could be a great time-saving tool, but ultimately we need to take responsibility for the final check and balance, especially if we're using it to help us get our work done. We are still ultimately accountable for the quality of the work that we output. So now we know a bit about AI and we understand sort of how it works, if you like. We're going to take a look at how we might use some of its power. Now, the example I'm going to give you today, I'm just making sure we're okay in the chat, just letting in a load more people. Wow. The example we're going to use today is Gemini. I'm using Gemini, and I've been using Gemini now for 6-8 months maybe. I'm not saying it's better than ChatGPT or anything like that. I'm in the sort of Google ecosystem, so it kind of makes sense for me to use a Google product, which is what Gemini is. It's a family of multimodal large language models. And we already talked about what a large language model was. If you think about it, this is where it looks at the internet and gets all its data from there. It's been developed by Google DeepMind. So it launched in 2023, and Gemini sort of was a little bit late to the party. It certainly came after ChatGPT, but it signifies sort of a bit of a leap forward in AI capability, and it's a really good contender for OpenAI's ChatGPT 4. So I realised that I've just used a terrible jargony word there, which is multimodal. So let me explain you what multimodal means. It means it can understand and process different types of information, basically. So text, code, audio, images, videos, it can understand all of that stuff. So that means that rather than being a one-trick pony like Firefly that we used to use a draw our guinea pig earlier, it can help us in loads of different situations. So in terms of text generation and creative writing, we're talking about poems and scripts and course outlines and emails and all of that nice stuff. Information retrieval, question answering, factual queries, complex research topics, summarizing things. It can do all of that as well. And then on top of that, it can also do translation and language understanding across a range of different languages, which again, we'll look at shortly. And then because it can link into other things like YouTube and TED Talks and imagery and Google Images and all of that nice stuff, it can suggest images and videos that we might want to use as well. Doesn't generate images yet, but it can suggest images to us, and then we can use another tool to generate those. So why is multimodal better? Well, it basically means that it can handle loads of different types of data. So for example, ChatGPT is really good for answering questions. Firefly is really good for producing images. Gemini can pretty much do all of that stuff. So what I propose to do now is this is a bit where I get nervous. Let's have a look at it. Let's use Gemini in the real world with a couple of examples, and I'll show you how I'm using this to get my work done. So if I just bring up Gemini, I'm going to swap my screen again. Give me a sec. There we go. Now, hopefully you can all see that on the screen. So this is Gemini. So where do you find it? How do you download it? Well, it's web-based. Okay, so Gemini is, you go to gemini.google.com and here it is. Don't do it just yet. I'll walk you through it first. And this is what this is what the interface looks like. It's very, very clean. We basically have a prompt box at the bottom. If I can show you that, there you go. It's got this little prompt box down here, and basically what it's doing is asking us to type in a text prompt, or we can upload an image, or we can even use our microphone to talk a prompt into it, should we want to do that. Okay. Gemini is completely free. There is an advanced version of Gemini. I haven't even gone down that line. It allows you to do slightly more, but I've yet to find a limitation on it. So it's completely free to use. Just, you know, I log in with my Google account because it means it's in multiple places, but ultimately it's just there for you to have a play with. So yeah, that works really, really well. So thank you. That's a really good question. So what are we going to do with Gemini today? So firstly, at the top here, it has some, if I zoom in a bit, there you go. It has some things we might want to do. Sell a debate. Should you store bread? Okay, well, that's good to be a bit of fun. List power words from my CV or my resume that show and highlight teamwork. Okay, we can click on it. I might want to do that. For some reason, it's suggesting I might want to fly to Tokyo or Seoul and things to do when I get there. And it compares the difference between pickleball and tennis, which I know nothing about. What I'm going to do, though, is let's go with this debate one, settle a debate. We're not going to do bread. I'm going to put in another one, which is which came first, the chicken or the egg? Okay, which is one of those questions that comes up quite a lot. Let's have a look. So we pop that in and submit. Away we go. I think, look how quick that was. It's already done. So it's not as simple as it sounds. So while you might like the paradox, the scientific consensus is that the egg came before the chicken. Okay. So here's a breakdown. Eggs predate chickens, evolutionary change. The first chicken egg, the first egg to hatch a chicken wasn't necessarily laid by a chicken. It was laid by a bird with chicken-like characters. So while the question is a classic philosophical puzzle, the scientific answer leans towards the egg being earlier. Okay, done. Okay, so there's our first use of generative AI. I guess in some ways it makes sense. Just highlighting the buttons along the bottom here. We could say whether we found that useful or not. I'll come to the settings in a minute. We can share that. And this Google icon here is quite important. I'll show you what that does in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to say I quite like that response. And again, you remember we said earlier about we need to help it learn. Okay, I'm going to say this was clear and easy to understand. Now, you don't have to do this every time. There you go, easy to understand. And I'm going to submit that, okay? We can modify our response, which we'll come to in just a second. We can share. So what can we do? Well, we can share this with another person via a text message or an email, perhaps. We can export it to a document. So we could write a whole script, if you like, or get Gemini to help us with that, and then we could export it to a Word document, or we could even draft it in an email should we want to do that. Mohammed, I'll come to that in a minute. What's the difference between Gemini and the other search tools? So thank you very much. I'll cover that with you in a second. The Google icon here, and this for me is why I really like Gemini as opposed to some of the other tools. Some of the other tools will give you an answer. What Gemini does is, remember what we said about I can't assume that everything it says on here is fact. I need to make that conscious decision myself. I need to question it more. If we click on the Google button here, what it's going to do is it's going to take the answer it's given us. It's going to evaluate that. Okay, and I don't know how easy that is for you to see. Can you see that some of the text it's highlighted in green and some of it is put in brown? The ones in brown have got a little exclamation mark with them. The ones in green, we now got a drop-down button next to it. If we click on this, we can expand that. And it actually tells you, here's the source of that piece of information. Eggs have existed for millions of years, long before chickens. It actually got that from science.org.au. Okay, and then we could go onto that site and do further reading in the background if we like. So in Google's head, that's fact, okay, because it's come from a reputable science-based website, science-based paper, and that's where it's saying, look, this is where this fact comes from. This one came from ukclimbing.com, whatever it may be. This one in brown, it's a bit, well, we can't prove this, but the chances are this is what the consensus on the internet is saying. So if we click into the little expand on that one, it's saying, consider researching further to make sure this statement is credible. Now, I really like that. So basically what it's saying is the chances are this is what's happening, but we can't guarantee that. So it gives you that sort of, again, it's up to you to make the choice whether you're going to use that or not. Actually, let's take that sentence, which is over time bird species. Right, so if we pop that into our prompt box and we say, explain this in more detail. And what it's going to do there is it's going to take that first bit of text and then create another. There you go. So this is saying the transformation, domesticated chickens, this is how it worked. There's genetic change over time, factors. There's loads of stuff there. In fact, do you know what? That's a bit too sciencey for me. That's gone way above my head. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come down to another one of the buttons at the bottom, which is modify response. Click on that. I'm going to say, you can make it shorter, you can make it longer, you can simplify it. Well, maybe that'd be good for me. Make it more professional, make it more casual. So firstly, I'm going to make it simpler. Well, there you go. It's summarized all of that into chickens go for wild birds. A long time ago, there were wild birds called red jungle fowl. People started to keep them and chose the ones they like the best to breed. Over many, many years, these birds changed and became what we know as chickens today. Quite like that. That's exactly the sort of level that I'm at. Some of you are obviously slightly more, but you can see again how quickly we can put these things together and how quickly we can just sort of change the text that suits us. The questions come in there. Can I make a regenerate? Do you mean you could ask the same question again? But the way Gemini works, and again, this is one of the advantages I feel over something like ChatGPT. Imagine what we're doing here. This whole thread, if you like, is an ongoing conversation. So Gemini knows what I've asked previously. Gemini knows what is answered previously, and therefore I can ask more questions without having to type huge prompts. So let me give you an example. Chickens come from wild birds. So even without, where are we? Eggs have existed for millions of years. Okay, so let's say, other than chickens, what else lays eggs? And I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to say, is it just mammals, which we know is wrong? Let's see what it does. Right. There you go. So firstly, it's answered my first question. It goes, no, mammals are not the only leg. In fact, most mammals give birth to live young. Animals that lay eggs are called blah, 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 blah. There we go. Okay, so it's put all that together for us. Now let's imagine I want to write a report about this. So let's say create an outline for a short email to explain this concept to my boss. There we go. Okay, so what have we got here? Let's have a look. Let me drop that down. So we've got an email outline. So it's given us a subject, quick fact, egg-laying animals. Here's the introduction. It's telling us what to do. Here's the main points we need to make. Here's the closing. And it even then puts all that together as an example email for me. So we can have multiple options. We can say, can you generate this again, or tell me more information? But it basically pops all of that stuff together. Now, what we could also do is upload an image and say, explain this image to me. Tell me more about what's going on here. So let's imagine, just give you an idea of what it could do there. But now let's imagine how I might use this in my work. So let's say I'm visiting a technology show and I want to keep up to date with the latest developments around a piece of software, which ironically, for full disclosure, People Unboxed work with, called BentoBot. Okay, so BentoBot is a spaced repetition app. Now, that may mean nothing to you, but I need to prep for that show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a new chat over here, and I'm going to say, explain BentoBot spaced repetition to me. Here we go. Okay, amazing. So what it's done there is says it uses spaced repetition to help you learn. Here's how it works. Bite-sized learning. See, I think this is a bit long, this bit in the middle of how it works. So I might say, give me the top 3 benefits. Okay, and what I'm doing again is, there you go. It's just give me three-bit things, and bosh, it's done. So let's say my marketing department have also asked me to write a short blog post highlighting the benefits of Bento. Well, let's exactly ask it to do that. Write a short blog post highlighting the benefits of Bento. Okay, so it's got my title in there. It's suggested an image I might use. Now, actually, this image has come from the BentoBot website, as we can see there. And it's also even given me the hashtags to use if I post this on LinkedIn, for example. Now, again, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm not literally going to copy and paste this. All right. I'm going to use this as an idea to help me write an article. We might want to go further. What about if we want to do a presentation, like maybe for a webinar? Create a 30-minute presentation explaining it. Okay, so it said, okay, here's what you do, 5 minutes of the intro, then we're going to do 10 minutes for how it works and question and answers and all of the rest of it. Okay, what about we might want to put a question in there to make sure people have understood. Create a multiple choice question showing the correct answer along with 3 detractor answers for what is spaced repetition. And again, look how quickly it's coming up with this stuff. It's giving me the question, what is spaced repetition? It's giving me the answer. It knows which one's the right answer. It's giving me detractor answers. All of that stuff are being built for me. As someone who writes e-learning quite regularly, this is a huge time saving. Coming up with answers that are credible but aren't the right answer is always something I really struggle with. So this really helps me with that. Okay. Or what about, let's say let's start another quick one, and we might say we're doing a piece of e-learning on food safety, for example. So let me cut and paste these bits in. Create a title for a compliance course on the importance of good food hygiene in a restaurant business. Okay, so here's some ideas: short and sweet, informative and clear, engaging and memorable. Okay, I quite like those. And we can modify our response and we say, well, let's make them more casual. Keep you cool in the kitchen, food safety, no sweat. Or we could say clean eats, a relaxing look at food hygiene, whatever it may be. So some nice ideas there. Let's just show you one more thing that we can do is for questioning this, we're saying, okay, and bear in mind, in terms of context, Gemini knows that we're still talking about food safety here. What's the difference between direct and indirect cross-contamination? Okay, so it's going to basically dial in onto that. I think that's quite hard to read. So what we can also do, as well as prompts, we can say, okay, display that in a slightly different way for me. Show me this comparison in a table format. And bosh, there it goes. So straight into a table. We can export that to an Excel sheet if we want, but it's a really visual way of showing that. Maybe we can ask for some images. We can ask it to show information in a certain way. We can ask all of these things, and it's going to produce that for us. The absolute killer for me, which if we've got anybody on the webinar who could tell me whether the output of this is right or wrong, because I genuinely don't know. What we can also do is say, my client also said that we need a version of this for Polish speaking people. Okay, so people with Polish as their first language. So I'm going to take the same stuff and say, translate into this into Polish for me. Wow. And there we go. So look how quickly it's translated that into Polish for me, or any other language that Google Translate supports. So you can see, it's shown me some key data around food safety, for example. Okay. Now I'm doing this because there's a question in the chat, and the answer is I really don't know. So let's see what it can do and what it can't do. I would imagine. Okay, it can't generate visuals like infographics at the moment. However, what we can do is take that and use something like Firefly again, which will allow us to do exactly that. So it's not there yet, but it's telling us how it thinks we should do that. So, Ellie, sorry, no, it's not. It's not doing that for you at the moment. Okay, so I'm just going to jump back to my slides. I realise we've only got sort of 10 minutes left together, and there's a few bits that I want to sort of cover off with you in more detail, and answer those and tell you what's going next. It's not going to take us long. So, firstly, hopefully you can get a taster for Gemini there, and you can see some of the power of what we can do. Uses for Gemini: marketing and content creation, we've already looked at; research and development, summarizing research papers, brainstorming ideas. You can put a PDF in, for example, and Adobe actually do this in Acrobat as well, now that that's got AI built in. And what that will do is you can ask it a question, and not only will it answer the question, but it will only consider that paper to answer the question, which is really good for doing like research for clinical trials. There were people that were concerned about what about our data? Well, if you've got a private document, we can put that into Acrobat and ask a question. And not only will it answer the question, but it also point you at the paragraph and point you at the page that it's talking about, which again is brilliant. So imagine it's 40 pages long. It can go, actually on page 18, here's where I got this answer from. So that could be really helpful. Education and training, I use it all the time to help me get over creative blocks, I think it's fair to say. I don't get it to help me write e-learning. I get it to give me some ideas. I ask it scenarios. Scenarios are a really nice way of working. It's explain this to me in a scenario based in a fast food restaurant, for example. Productivity and communication is the other one, writing emails, that sort of stuff. So although they're getting better now, one critical thing to get right is that any of the AI tools is you've got to get the prompt right. Okay, so you saw there, so there were some very specific things I was writing to get it to do what I want, and you'll learn that over time. And be really careful. Imagine being in the car. So Apple CarPlay uses Siri to basically do an AI search in the car for you. Now imagine this scenario, and let's just assume this is a real world scenario. I can say to Apple CarPlay, tell my wife I love her. Okay, be very careful because that may not do what you expect. You and I both know what I expect it to do. It could send a message to my wife that says, I love you. But think about the prompt. The prompt was tell my wife I love her. So based on that prompt, it's just as likely to send a message to my wife that literally says, I love her, which is slightly different, and it's going to have very different consequences and result in my answering some very tricky questions potentially further down the line. So be a little bit careful. How can you differentiate between AI creative work and human written work, i.e. what can AI produce in 2 minutes could take a human a week? I'll come to that in just a second, Emma, because you get very good at spotting it. You get very good at spotting AI created content, I think it's fair to say, if it's been cut and pasted directly out. The first and foremost is that certainly Gemini writes in American, which for me, as soon as I see things that have got lots of Zs rather than S's and all of the rest into it, I'm then looking at it thinking, yeah, that's not quite right. That's not the only way you can find out, but you can see other things, which I'll come to in a sec. So in terms of writing prompts, yeah, it's about being clear and specific. Be clear about what you want it to do. So instead of saying write a story, provide details, provide the genre, provide the characters, the setting, the plot points. The more information you can get in, the more Gemini will do a really good job of saying, and I get it, I understand what you mean. The more specific you are, the better it's going to understand your intent. But at the same time, don't be afraid to experiment. So use prompts that spark imagination, encourage the model to explore new ideas. Use open-ended prompts that can lead to some sort of surprising and sometimes engaging results. So rather than summarize, You could say, you can put a load of text and say, summarize this for me. It's going to do that. Why not try explain this to me using a scenario in a clothing shop? Okay, and it will say, imagine Emma, she was this person, and basically it gives you a really nice scenario that you can use. And the other thing is provide as much context, provide as much information as you can, provide it with the relevant information to work with. That could be factual details, and you know it's rare that we ask someone a question face to face and just accept the answer. We usually ask a follow-up question, or we usually ask them to clarify. We usually ask them for examples. You must do the same with your AI prompts. So the first thing that comes out, you think, oh, that sounds like a great answer. Great, I'm done. Please ask a follow-up question. And that follow-up question could be, what are counter arguments against this? How else might we embed learning? Is spaced repetition the only way to do that? So by asking those sort of questions, what happens is we're building up a wider picture, if you like, which we then understand more of the topic and we can do more with. Look at the difference between draw a picture of a guinea pig on a motorbike. Who knows what's going to come up there, as opposed to an aggressive looking guinea pig wearing a blue and white crash helmet, riding a grey quad bike, splashing through muddy puzzles. I've given it so much to work around, and you saw it came up with some really nice ideas. Okay, we have 4 minutes left. So finally, I just want to cover very quickly the what's next question. So although very late to the party, when a company like Apple go all in on AI, you probably know that it's here to stay. So I'm not going to cover everything that Apple covered at their event on, ironically called Apple Intelligence, typical of Apple to pick up AI and say, you thought it was artificial intelligence. Doesn't mean that. They're very... the reason I'm telling you this is Apple's take on this is slightly different to everyone else's. They're both powerful AI tools, but both Gemini and Apple Intelligence have very different strengths. The biggest one being this idea of context. So let me explain what I mean by that. Apple Intelligence focuses on the Apple ecosystem. So the idea is it thinks you've got an iPhone and possibly you've got an iPad and possibly you work on a Mac or whatever. The beauty of it, and where it's a real differentiator from all of the other tools that we've already talked about, is that firstly, all of the processing is done on that device, so it's not sending it off to a server somewhere. So if privacy is important to you, this is a real big plus because it's doing everything on your device. The other differentiator, and probably the biggest one, is all about context. So Apple can use context to make your life easier. Let me explain what I mean. Imagine you always check the weather on your phone before going out in the morning. Okay, so it's going to push that to you, so you don't have to actually ask that. So Apple Intelligence, by learning your routine, automatically displays the weather forecast as you grab your phone in the morning. It knows you and it knows your needs. So if you're struggling to write an email, it might analyze your past emails. Now, Gemini hasn't got access to your past emails. Gemini hasn't got access to who your boss is or who your wife may be or who your partner is. Apple Intelligence, because it's all in one place, has got all of that information. It's got a lot more context to read into it. So it could suggest helpful phrases or complete sentences based on the context of your message. It knows who your family members are. It knows who your work colleagues are. So phrases, responses to those people differently to how it would to a new client, for example. Let's say you're texting a friend about meeting for lunch, for example. Now, using the context, Apple Intelligence could suggest a nearby restaurant or even recommend one based on your previous preferences. And by understanding the situation from your past behavior, it can aim to anticipate your needs. It's like, I guess in some ways, it's like having a super smart device that can read your mind. Imagine writing an email to a colleague and mentioning a document. What Apple Intelligence can do is find that document and links that in the email for you. You don't have to go and find it. And if you mention a date in that email that you need feedback by, it pops that reminder in your diary to check a couple of days before. So because it's all in one place, can you see the power of using that all on one device? It can see your calendar, it can see your emails, it can see who your contacts are, excuse me. It knows the way that you speak. So this is where we're going in terms of the future of AI, and Apple, being Apple, are pretty much there, ready to go. Okay, so we are nigh on spot on 11 o'clock. I did mention that I was going to quickly talk about copyright because I know that worries people. Is AI generated content copyright exempt? Short answer to that is it's really complicated. So firstly, imagine images. There's no direct copyright because copyright has to be owned by a person and AI is not a person. However, how are the images like the guinea pig? How's that image actually created? Well, it's created by being trained on massive data sets, loads and loads of imagery, most of which will be copyrighted material. So there are concerns about potential copyright infringement. So again, use it as a research tool. You don't use it to do your work. Okay. So in short, see AI as a tool that can help you be more productive, not as something that will do your work for you. Okay, now I know you've got 1,000 more questions for me. Apologies that time has caught up with us. It's so good to see so many of you on. We're 70, 80 people on doing this. Before we go, firstly, thank you so much for your time. Secondly, I just wanted to call out our next free webinar, which will be great to see you on. I'm just popping a link to that in the chat there now for you. This one's all going to be about motivation, and Rich is going to take that one on the 4th of September. It'd be lovely to see so many of you on. Is there a free version for creating generative AI? Nassim, Gemini is free. The standard version is free. So yeah, seriously, go on to gemini.google.com, and you can do everything that I've done today on there. So please do have a go with that. And finally, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me. Hopefully I've dispelled a few myths. Hopefully some of you are wanting to have a go now. I encourage you to do that, and I'd love to see you on another webinar sometime soon. Thanks very much for your time, everyone.